Okay.
Okay.
Are we live, Ray?
You're live.
Hi, I'm Linda Deir, and I'm really happy to be with you guys today, reading from Guided. All right. So today what I'm going to do a little bit, I'm going to add a little thing for you guys. Okay. This is Guided, the paperback version. Guided is available on Amazon in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook format. And I read the book. All right. So here's what the front of the book looks like. Here's my spirit guide that I took a photograph when they showed up in 1994, although I'd seen them since I was a baby, on the front cover of the book. Then on the back of the book, many of you get guided in either Kindle or audiobook format, so you never see the back of the book. So I'm going to read it to you, okay, before we get started. Linda didn't have a friend in the world. Fortunately, she had very good friends who were not in the world. Even as a child, Linda Deir was different. She didn't really fit in. This was fine with her because she had all the friendship and love she needed from her spirit guide angels. These benevolent life coaches never compelled, they just suggested. The choice was always hers. Then, in 1994, Linda's spirit guide angel materialized right in front of her when she had a camera in hand. The photograph Linda took is on the front cover of this book. This is the only book ever written about spirit guides or angels with a real photograph of the author's spirit guide angel. That same year, in a dream, her spirit guides told her to write this book. It was to help people free themselves from their fear-based lives and connect with their own spirit guides so they could live the life they intended before they were born. Using her own life as an example, she wrote Guided, a fascinating true story of triumph over extreme adversity and a template for opening to the invisible loving friends that are all around you. Are you ready to get to know them? Okay. Last Saturday, I read to you from chapter 12 of my true life story, Guided. Her spirit guide angels were her best friends and life coaches. I read about second warning and I listened. By the time I started building the 3 showcase homes, change was in the air. It was palatable, but only to me. So many realizations occurred to me in that year. It was made clear to me by my guides that the time had come to sell everything and stop planning out into the future before things flip-flopped. They showed me that things that worked before would no longer work. It was just the beginning of the warning signs that I would continue to receive from my guides. Today, I will be reading to you from chapter 13 of Guided, Everyone's Reaction to Change. It turned out that my many achievements made Alex feel inadequate. He always told me that he was envious of my high energy. It turns out that he was serious about that, and his solution to getting more energy was to take cocaine. While I was going through the divorce, my mother told me how I had made my dad feel inadequate. I was shocked to hear that. Dad was always my hero. Why would he ever feel like that? According to Mom and just about everyone else, I made everything look so easy. She said I had made more money in 1 year than Dad did in his best 5. All this was just an echo for me, hearing this time and time again in one form or another. How did I do all this on my own? I didn't. I had help along the way. I knew I was being guided. I had fun doing it. I was successful doing it. And that's what made it look so easy. So sit back and relax as I tell the story about how, despite the dysfunction, my spirit guides took me on one journey after another that led to a greater understanding of myself. Okay. All right. Chapter 13, Everyone's Reaction to Change. Moving on and out of the real estate phase of my life became harder than I thought it would be. The divorce was dragging on because Alex would not let me go. He would not sign the divorce papers, the escrow papers on the houses I finished and sold, or the settlement agreement. I discovered he was having me followed, and I had to hire a private investigator to find out why. Just before the settlement agreement and divorce were finalized, I discovered through the private investigator that Alex was dealing drugs. Apparently, he had been doing it for years. I had filed for divorce because of his infidelity, but that was small potatoes compared to this. What I couldn't wrap my head around was why would he do this when we had all the money we needed? I came to the conclusion that for him, it was about power. He was able to control people through the lure of drugs. I had to take Cindy out of school and get her a private tutor because Alex threatened to kidnap her. At one point, the guys Alex hired to follow me shot bullets through the back window of my car while Cindy was with me. That was surreal. And things were becoming much worse than I ever thought they would. After the shooting incident, I had a restraining order placed against Alex. Then I was contacted by the police, Victims of Crime Division, who offered me protection. My freedoms were threatened because everyone wanted me to crawl into a corner and hide. That was not for me, and it really angered me. I told my private investigator I refused to allow my life to be restricted like that. So he took me to buy a gun and get a permit to carry it. I also went to school and learned how to shoot it. I knew Alex wasn't doing what he did because he loved me. It was because I provided the only stability he ever had. And I made a lot of money. I learned that not only was Alex selling drugs, he was taking them too. Upon reflection, I finally understood why he had been so erratic over the last several years. I overestimated Alex. I thought he was smarter and stronger than he really was. It turned out that my achievements and my making more money than Alex did made him feel inadequate. He always told me that he was envious of my high energy. It turns out that he was serious about that, and his solution to getting more energy was to take cocaine. While I was going through the divorce, my mother told me how I had made my dad feel inadequate. I was shocked to hear that. Dad was always my hero. Why would he ever feel that way? According to Mom and just about everyone else, I made everything look so easy. She said I made more money in 1 year than Dad did in his best 5. All this was just an echo for me, hearing this time and time again in one form or another. How did I do all this on my own? I didn't. I had help along the way. I knew I was being guided. I had fun doing it. I was successful doing it. And that's what made it look easy. She said Dad told her that what he learned from me was that he didn't take enough risk in his life. I never talked to Dad about it, but I didn't agree with his reasoning. The times Dad lived in would not have supported the way I did things. Timing is everything. Add to this his heavy load, the heavy load my dad had to carry, supporting the family as a sole provider. What Dad could have said that would have made more sense is that he wished he could have been born in a different time. It's all about timing. So no matter how good you are at what you do, and that includes me, awareness. This is what regret looks like. For my dad to perceive me the way he did was evidence that he had regrets in his life. He was not living in the flow with the help of his guides. Instead, he was making decisions based on lack and fear. Of course, that just draws those negative qualities to you as it compounds. Though I was on the verge of being completely clear of the threat of the real estate correction, the divorce was dragging dangerously out and keeping me in the market. Then my private investigator informed me that Alex was being watched by the police narcotics division. He said they were planning a sting to take him down, and they were going to do it soon. Time was short if I wanted to finalize things. The last group of homes was finished, sold, and ready to close, but I needed Alex's sign-off. With the impending real estate crash, and no one believing it was going to happen, and discovering Alex's drug dealing and the coming bust, I had no more time to wait for Alex to comply. It was now or never. I was not scared because I was not alone. They, my spirit guides and angels, were with me. The first thing I did was notify the private investigator that I was going to call Alex and inform him that we were going to meet to sign the divorce papers. I would meet Alex in a public place, breaking the restraining order. I was going to bring my loaded gun, and I would tell Alex to do the same. I knew things could get messy, and possibly only one of us would walk away from that meeting. I know this sounds extreme, but I felt it was absolutely necessary. Before the private investigator could object, I hung up the phone. Then I called Alex and set up the meeting. As soon as we met, I put the divorce papers on the table, turned them around facing him, laid a pen down, and told him to start signing. Before he signed, he smiled at me and said, "This is what I always loved about you, Linda." I just shook my head and pushed the divorce papers even closer to him. He asked me if everything was split equally, and I told him it was. That's when he started signing. He never read the documents, contracts, escrow papers, or tax returns. I had always handled that, so why would he start questioning me now? Besides, he knew he could always trust me, even in a situation like this. We met at the escrow office the next day to sign the papers so we could close the remaining home sales. That was the end of our marriage, our business together, and my contact with him. It was also my ticket to escaping from a housing crash. In hindsight, he delayed everything because he wasn't accepting reality. When he realized it was over, it ended on mutually good terms. Tip: keeping a cool head will allow you to achieve things and handle them quickly. Don't get caught up in the what ifs and drama. Your guides are masters at keeping it real. After we finalized the paperwork, Alex left me alone. About 2 weeks later, the police busted him. They found what they were looking for, and after a long trial that depleted Alex financially, he went to prison. Because they were watching him for so long, they knew I was never a party to his drug dealings. They never bothered me or questioned me at all. Like in the bubble dream, I was protected. 3 months after the divorce was final, the real estate market started crashing. I was completely cashed out, but everyone I knew was affected. Many went bankrupt, lost everything, including their superficial marriages, partnerships, expensive exotic cars, and mansions. A few got out before the crash. The few that got out before the market crashed continued thinking they were hot stuff. I told them what I thought of them. I just didn't care what anyone thought of me. I finally stopped going to the places where I might run into them. I was concerned about how all the changes, turmoil, and violence was affecting Cindy. So I found a psychologist she could talk to because I was too close to it. Cindy was now 10 years old. These sessions went on for about 3 months. And one day, Cindy told me she didn't want to go anymore. I said, no, she said she wasn't learning anything. I was talking to the psychologist periodically, but the counseling sessions were private. When Cindy said she didn't want to go anymore, I spoke to the psychologist about it. She was completely brainwashed with all of Cindy's manufactured lies and manipulations. Cindy just got bored with her. I surmised that she was no longer a challenge. I told the psychologist that she had been conned by a kid, just like the kindergarten teacher had been. That was the end of that. The only thing Cindy learned was that how easy it was to con people, even trained, educated professionals. From the time I was first warned by my guides about the real estate crash in 1976, it took me about 18 months to finish my projects, sell all the houses and rental properties I had accumulated, and get out of my marriage. Selling everything just before the real estate crash was a good and bad thing because cutting it so close made the last home buyers angry with me. They realized they bought at the peak and didn't like it. Several of them sued me, asking for their money back. Of course, they had no grounds, and every case was thrown out of court. Still, I learned to never cut it that close again. Everyone I knew in the business got caught with lots of inventory and was hit hard. Of course, these were the same guys who thought they created their successes in the first place and who had ignored my warnings. They had also ignored the warnings from their best advisors, their guides, the ones who originally brought them all that success. About 6 months after I had resolved all the issues pending with my life and business, I found myself between exhaustion and feeling lost. Since I didn't know what else to do other than real estate, I just treaded water. I was very selective about properties and just built a few houses at a time, working on a much smaller scale than I had been used to. But it wasn't fun anymore. For the first time in my life, I was working to make a living, not because I liked it. Despite this, I decided to buy some undeveloped land in a great location in a nearby city, Carmichael. It was zoned for duplexes. So I had the engineering done and submitted the plans to the county for approval. While that was pending, I took a vacation, a cruise through the Caribbean for 2 weeks by myself. It was 1979, and I had just turned 27. I realized that I had already lived a whole lifetime, and I was not even 30 yet. It all happened so fast that I felt out of sync. I also noticed that slowing down was painful. It was easier and more exciting in the fast lane. It was much simpler working at something I loved and being supported by the boom times. The merry-go-round dream that I was still having came to mind. And I saw that the faster the merry-go-round went, the better I felt. However, just like the real estate correction that no one wanted to believe was coming, I saw that people in the dream couldn't be reached. Returning home from the cruise, I was hit with two shocks. The first was the interest rate on my subdivision was now 21.5%. The other was a very powerful intuitive message from my guides. I was shown a future where I would no longer be able to be the recluse I had been. As a professional, I always knew what to do and how to act. But as I indicated earlier, in my personal life, I didn't have a clue about what to do since I had never had a personal life. I felt an immediate hit to my ego, fear, something I didn't even know was there. In an instant, I was scared, embarrassed, shamed, and confused. I was always sure of myself and felt I knew who I was. But this powerful moment of truth made me instantly doubt all that. This was a great humbling, and in that single moment, they showed me what was to come. For the first time ever, I was scared of what was to come for me personally. Awareness. There are times when you get an instant knowing. It's always from your guides. They see something coming that needs your attention. The stronger the feeling, the more you need to take heed. The real estate crash put my little brother, Larry, out of work. So I let him live with Cindy and me again. When I returned home from the cruise, I found him very unstable emotionally. He was angry that he didn't have work, and this anger hadn't resolved itself like mine had over the previous 7 years. In fact, his had continued to build, and I had to find him another place to live because I was concerned for our safety. In the meantime, I started building the duplexes in my new subdivision. That was a nice project for me. I made money in a terrible recession. It was a perfect location and a product for that time. It also gave Larry work, which mellowed him out. The subdivision kept me going for the next 2 years. Little did I know that I was given the project as a timeout to work through my personal life skill deficiencies that I had not previously had an opportunity to develop. That was all the doing of my guides. Tip: even though I felt a bomb had just been dropped on me by my guides, first letting me know I needed to tend to my social and personal life deficiencies, they supported me in moving in that direction by having the duplex project. They gave me the time I would need and the project that provided financial support to work on this. The lesson here is that your guides never just tell you what you need to do. They also provide you the support so you can achieve it. This only works if you listen and take action on it. Despite things going financially well for us, Cindy was becoming more and more insecure. She was drawing pictures of herself crying and me with bloodshot eyes. Her perception of me was bizarre. She drew pictures of the family, and I was always the big person in the picture. The divorce brought out abandonment issues in her and a need for approval from men. Her poor father role, the poor father role that Alex played was now affecting her. It had come, it came, uh, it came up because it was over. He was gone, and there was no dad. She was clinging to anyone she could, especially men. Cindy didn't know her dad had gotten busted for drugs and was facing a prison sentence. That didn't come out until much later when my mom presented Cindy with a news story about Alex's bust and prison sentence. Cindy was shocked. My mom loved dropping that bomb on her. I was very concerned about Cindy. I let her know about the times before her dad lost his way, that he really tried hard and was smart. I also told her that selling and using drugs were some of the reasons I had to divorce him. She was beginning to understand. I would have made a big shift out of the building business sooner had I only known what to shift into. But I didn't have a clue, and I felt frozen, like something was holding me back. That was the first time in my life I didn't have a clear direction, or at least I didn't recognize one. Now that I was on my own, my mother started to tell me to send Cindy to a boarding school. I thought she was way off base suggesting this, and I told her to never do that again. I warned her to never bring it up. I would find out years later that what she told me to do with Cindy is what happened to her when she was about the same age as Cindy. As I was bumbling around trying to figure things out, I became friends with a woman from the neighborhood where I had built our last family home. Mary was going through a divorce along with a bankruptcy. She became the first real female friend I ever had. I had always been careful not to let anyone get too close to me, especially women. It had always been men who had helped me. Generally, women didn't like me. But Mary was outrageous and funny. She and I would smoke cigarettes and drink coffee as we worked through what had happened in our lives. We were both very intense and confused at that point. We really helped each other. Mary had just opened a clothing store on a shoestring and was struggling financially and emotionally. Before she got married and had kids, she intended to be a nun. That pretty much describes her reclusive nature. Like me, she was inexperienced about life except for work. Like me, she was a workaholic and had become very successful. Her work was also her safe haven, a place where she could control her destiny, just like me. So there was a lot of common ground on which we could build this friendship. When I used when I used to I was used to learning from and following my intuition, using my inner guidance system. So sharing with someone was new and strange for me. The biggest hurdle was letting anyone that close and then trusting them. From the lifetime of training I received from my most trusted advisors, my guides, I was very sober about things, seeing them for what they really were without the drama. As Mary and I exchanged thoughts and ideas, I started to get a clearer sense of myself. Life was beginning to come into balance for the first time. It was like I was getting my sea legs under me and in the personal interaction arena. She challenged me all the time. I would think about what she said and agree with her sometimes. At other times, I saw things from a totally different point of view. We did a lot of mind walking together as we puffed on those cigarettes late into the evenings. We were equally hungry for answers, real ones. I wasn't used to having friendships, but I was used to the intensity that we both shared. Awareness. When you have a relationship with your guides, expect it to be intense. As things were shifting for me, my dream life was expanding. It was the late 1970s, early 1980s, and I was still having the merry-go-round dream. I had dreams that showed me things like money would have no value, owning things would no longer be desirable, rent everything, and many other revelations that are happening even right now in the world. They continued to show me what's to come with every passing week, month, and year. Upon reflection after the divorce, communication with my guides had slowed down, resulting in my lack of direction. It turned out that this was exactly what I needed at that time. They knew I needed to do the inner work that could not have happened until I worked through the anger issues that had dominated my life for so long. As I got on the other side of it, I discovered how the anger that had served me for so long was now a detriment to my moving forward. It was my time to learn in new ways, and having personal relationship here in this world was a big part of it. My real challenges would be with trust. Bleh. My real challenges would be with trust issues, especially with women. People usually started out learning these things as kids, but they never get to know themselves first and become vulnerable to peer pressure. I bypassed all that, which gave me the capacity to develop the relationship I have with my guides. That allowed me at an early age to feel what was a good fit and what wasn't. When I was young, I had the kindest, wisest, clearest teachers and guides. But after the divorce, they were standing back while I caught up. Since there are no accidents, I know that Mary was sent in at just the right time by my guides and hers. We did some heavy life review together. We were equally committed to figuring it all out as we both caught up in our own individual ways. Amidst all the challenges, many of the people I knew in the building business started confiding in me and asking me what was going to happen next. After the real estate crash happened, they saw that I really was forewarned and, in their words, had some kind of psychic gift. They asked me how I learned to be so intuitive. I told them it started out as a survival skill, like going to war. Soldiers either develop their intuition or they come home in body bags. For me, it was a skill that got better with practice. People heard what I said because the intuition was sort of known to them at that time. And the survival analogy was easy for them to grasp. But having guides wasn't something they could wrap their heads around. So they looked past the guides thing and just wanted me to tell them what was going to happen next with real estate, the economy, politics, world events, and most importantly, how those events would affect them personally. They wanted to know what I knew without learning how to do it. It turned out that that was the beginning of where I would be going next. I just didn't realize it then. But it didn't matter because my guides knew and were with me every step of the way. Although I recognized that, I just didn't feel ready because I was deficient in my social and personal life skills. This was also when people first started telling me to write a book to help others with their lives. I had received guidance my entire life, and I had been using it for my own benefit. I just hadn't realized that it had any value to anyone else. Protecting myself by not letting others know my way of doing things had become so second nature to me that openly sharing it would have required a big shift in me at that time. I also didn't want to have to go through the trouble of defending it. To my surprise, this was the shift my guides were now demanding of me. So when people came to me for answers, I could be of service to them. That was just the beginning of the next phase of my life. Tip: this is what it's like when you have a connection with your guides. You feel like it's too much to explain to anyone else. You don't think anyone will really understand. However, once someone recognizes your abilities and sees your value in this area, people will start seeking you out for advice. While I was actually making some progress with developing interpersonal skills with my friend Mary, I the few times I dated were torture. I was so ill at ease that I would have to wear black clothing so my date couldn't see me sweat. At the end of the date, I would be drenched. I told my friend Mary I knew I would marry someone who was into computers and lived on the East Coast. But dating was out for me, so I quit. Mary was worse at working through her dating than I was. She was so turned off on men, she never dated at all. She was comfortable with her girlfriends and kids. I was learning a lot, exploring everything with Mary, so that's where I invested my energy. Awareness. Little did either of us know that much more was playing out through our becoming friends. All right. So, you guys, next week is the webinar. Going to be putting on a webinar next Saturday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. It's called The Light Beings, Preparing You for Your New Experiences. Go to my website, lindadeir.com, and click on live events, and you'll see where you can watch the video trailer and sign up. Again, they help you see what you can't and prepare you for what you need to do so that life isn't hard for you, okay? So 2 weeks from now, 2 Saturdays from now, August 1st at 1 p.m. Pacific time, I will read to you from chapter 14 of Guided, Dreading the Personal Relationship Arena. In a moment of clarity, I realized that I had been busying my life back up again with this subdivision, buying a townhouse, and in the planning stages of designing and building the Lake Tahoe house I hoped to start building soon. Working all the time had been protecting me from looking at personal relationships. Being friends with Mary was about all I could stand. My guides had made it clear that I needed to tend to my personal life skills. I could feel I was losing my way again, but I couldn't stop it. That was how much I dreaded the thought of venturing into the personal relationship arena. Until then, remember, you are never alone and always being guided.